The United States went into the Vietnam War to fight communism. What came from this war was far worse. The war began on November 1st, 1955, and ended on April 30th, 1975. It was the longest and most unpopular war the Americans ever fought, for many reasons. The Vietnam War was a tragic event that poisoned veterans with psychological disabilities such as PTSD and shell shock. Jobs were scarce, and they were mistreated. The Vietnam War veterans encountered many perils and explored life after the war.
Again in 1968.
Okay,
You were there for the Tet Offensive?
We went in right after the Tet Offensive.
What region did you serve in?
The first time was at Chu Lai, which is about 90 to 100 kilometers south of Da Nang. The second time, we were just outside of Da Nang, a little place called Hill 34.
How did you end up in Vietnam?
At that time, the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, said we need troops in Vietnam, and we were available. We were stationed at Kaneohe, Hawaii, and that's how I went by ship.
What was it like in service?
In service in Vietnam?
What was it like in the service in Vietnam?
Okay. A lot of the times, very boring. Of course, you know, we make our own boredom. And so we devised all kinds of things to keep from being bored. And then, of course, this boredom was intermingled with a lot of terrifying moments.
The Vietnam War was a horrible war, with the total lives lost was approximately 58,000, the fourth highest casualties in American history behind World War I.
Came through our area, and they dropped off a battalion of their North Vietnamese Army regulars, about 800. So I had 40. Captain White had 120. And so you compare that to 800. Of my 40 Marines, we had 14 killed and 20 wounded. The fighting was very, very fierce. Of the Nungs, 120 Nungs, 40 walked out. So I had 13 of my Marines that walked out. They escaped and evaded through the enemy to a small clearing where they were picked up by helicopters. I'm on the ground. A guy jumps the berm, runs through the area, just spraying the whole area with AK-47. And my platoon sergeant came over to me, and I asked him if he was hurt, and he just held his hands out, and he was hurt bad. His hands were just ragged. And then took one of his pressure bandages and was going to bandage him up. And you open them like this because they're in a hard plastic. And just as I did that, probably a piece of mortar hit me in the hand and knocked me down. And so then two guys jump over the berm and they're looking. And I'm thinking, oh, they're just going to spray me. That's because the one guy, that's what he did. And so I had my M16, and this all happening pretty fast, but it seemed like it was slow motion. And I didn't have a round in the chamber, so I pulled the lever back, let it go, hit the forward assist, but I couldn't pick it up. I couldn't pick up the rifle because when that piece hit me in the hand, it cut all the tendons in my hand. So I had no grip. So I picked it up left-handed, took a good 6 o'clock sight picture, took a breath of air, let out half my breath, squeezed off 18 rounds. It fired real good. No mouth. One of the last things I remember was a young man who I did not trust. He was a real no account. In fact, I was going to send him back on a helicopter the next morning. He's the only person in my battery of 145 men that I ever suspected of smoking dope. And he was a good-looking kid, and he was on not an M60, but a 30 caliber machine gun, which belonged to the Australian. He had no idea how to use it, but I taught him how to use it. And then he had a sector of fire that he was supposed to do. And it was actually out of the this end of the fort. So I made it up to that part and told him they're coming up the other way. So we picked up that machine gun and put it in the doorway of this bunker. And I told him now, I said, I'm going down to the other end. That's where all the radios were clear down here at this corner. I told him I was going to go down to the radios. I said, we need some air support. And I said, don't shoot me. Well, just prior to my going to this place, I was in a hole with 2 other guys. They did have an M60. And I was trying to get them to direct fire down, and a grenade ended up in the hole with us. It chucked me out of the hole, and Corporal King was killed. And so then I went over where this guy Conklin was, and we got the machine gun down, and so it's pointing, and it's right, I mean, my 2 guns are pointing up like this, and he is shooting just right across the perimeter from where we're right through our perimeter and where they were coming through. We had airlifted a 3/4 ton truck in to help haul ammo. Never used it. It wouldn't even come up the hill. We had to push it up the hill, pull it up the hill. It just wouldn't, it just wasn't strong enough. And it was on fire. So as they're coming up the hill, the bad guys are coming up the hill, they're silhouetted with the fire of this truck. And so I told Conklin that's where they're coming from. So I'm straddled the gun, bending over to get out of the hole, and he lets off a burst. And I thought he shot me. Because then my, I was stumbling around. My feet and legs were hurt, but I was still managing adrenaline probably. And I said, now don't shoot me. And he said, I see him coming. And so he's dropping him. He's dropping him with this M60 or this 30 caliber. He stayed on that 30 caliber and fired it so much that the barrel was white hot.
Ooh.
Yeah, and he had no extra barrel. So he took a round through the chest, fell over onto that hot barrel, and it just fried his chest. He came to and continued to fire.
Wow.
He received the nation's 2nd highest award for valor.
Many veterans were diagnosed with PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, and shell shock after the war. Many citizens misunderstood and mistreated returning soldiers because of society's view on the Vietnam War was very negative. Veterans to this day continue to struggle. Over 47% of homeless veterans are Vietnam veterans. The Vietnam War is a tragedy because of the effects which continue today. Those who fought and returned paid a high price that cannot be forgotten. For more than 2 million Vietnam veterans, the wounds of Vietnam will never heal.
There's battle lines being drawn, and nobody's right.